Welcome back to our show and thank you for watching. What does Miami have in common with Dubai and Singapore? Turns out a lot. All three are being flooded with wealthy transplants seeking tax-friendly international hubs to live and do business. All three cities are seeing real estate prices skyrocket, especially luxury real estate. And all three are growing as centers of international commerce, finance, art, and culture. I recently spoke to sociologist Alejandro Portes, co-author of Emerging Global Cities: Origin, Structure, and Significance. Professor, thank you very much for joining us for Facing South Florida. I'd like to start about talking about the genesis of your book, how you came up with the idea to write this city about emerging global cities, especially Miami. And I understand that you were on a visit to Dubai when you saw similarities between Dubai and Miami. What were those similarities?
First, the skyline. I was teaching at New York University campus in Abu Dhabi, but Dubai is an hour away from. So I went to Dubai frequently, and what struck me was the similarity of skylines between the two cities, and that would seem superficial at the time, but after conversations with people at the universities, economists, and others who knew the workings of Dubai, it turned out that the similarities were not simply superficial. That is, those skylines were there for the same reason in both cities, and that gave. And I had visited Singapore 2 years before, where everybody says it's just like Miami. So that because of the similarities. And so we started exploring this thing. But the idea for this book, I had written one previously on the transformation of Miami, published in 2018. But the idea for the book came from the physical look of the two places, the similarities.
Okay, going beyond the physical look, you have three cities in this book: Singapore, Dubai, and Miami. What are the similarities between these three cities and different parts of the globe?
Well, we call them emerging global cities because they have come to play a coordinating and centralizing role in the respective regions of the world. By convention in urban studies, the three global cities worldwide are New York, London, and Tokyo. But now that's had been studied intensively. But now there are these emerging these global cities that play a similar role in the regions. That is, as centers for finance and banking, having major ports and airports for commerce beyond the local city, that is for the entire area, and then having the three huge real estate, construction and real estate industry for sale of commercial property and residential property, not so much for the people who live in the city, but for foreigners, for outsiders. Miami sells, and the skyline of Miami is largely due to those condominium towers that are largely sold to foreigners, initially primarily from Latin America, all over Latin America. Dubai, that is impressive skyline, very few people, very few Emiratis can afford to buy these expensive condominiums, so they are sold to rich Indians, Pakistanis, Chinese, and so on. It plays the same role in the Middle East. And Singapore is very similar in terms of look and except in Southeast Asia. So in their respective regions, these are cities that have emerged as entrepots, as coordinating centers, and the three have very similar economies. That is, the pillars of the economy of each of these cities is surprisingly the same.
So what are the benefits for those of us who live in Miami of being a global city? A lot of the things that you're describing sound wonderful: expensive condos and these jobs in these multinational firms. But what are the benefits? And also, do we sort of become a city of haves and have-nots?
Absolutely. Actually, the old global cities like New York were already noted by their profound inequality. They are the people who are connected with the world system, in the banks, in the trading houses, in all the office buildings in Manhattan that earn high salaries and attend the opera and go to Lincoln Center and so on. And there is a workforce, a large workforce that operates there as office workers, clinics, and so on, but that cannot live in Manhattan. They live in the suburbs, in Queens, in the Bronx, and so on. So every day you see the commute of people coming to work in Manhattan and then leaving because they cannot afford to live in Manhattan. That is one of the aspects of the profound inequality of a global city between those who are the labor force and the people with what that the sociology Richard Florida called the creative classes, the people who invent all these symbolic products, the symbolic, both in commerce and in the media and in films on which our world is based right now, tend to be a privileged strata, and then and they tend to live in certain areas, which New York is Manhattan. Miami was not like that before. Miami was a relatively low income, low rent, local city when it was
a retirement place where people came and were able to live on their Social Security checks. I mean, that's not the case. Far from it.
It was a winter resort, and people came, and the old retirees from the north came to Miami to spend their last years in peace and quiet. But now they cannot afford it. As a matter of fact, there was a report. It was an article in the Economist 2 issues ago, in the June 10th issue, that listed the cities that rank the major cities in the world today in terms of the appreciation of real estate appreciation, and the absence of office vacancies, that most offices were actually occupied rather than being vacant. I ranked 10 cities. And that is just by coincidence, and I don't think that the researchers at The Economist had necessarily read our books. The 3 top cities were Miami, Dubai, and Singapore.
What a coincidence.
And Miami was the top city in terms of the capital, the real estate appreciations from 2018 to 2023 had the highest, is over about 35% increase in the cost of real estate, which that is people who live in Miami know well. So who can afford to live in Brickell? Who can afford to live in south of Fifth in Miami Beach? Who
That's
can
right.
afford even to live in downtown? Well, it's a privileged strata, people who work in the banks, who work in finances and so on. But increasingly, Miami is suffering from the same syndrome that the older global cities had, that is both being very prominent and that is economically and commercially and even culturally, but also being fragmented. That is separated into these enclaves of privilege and these areas, and the areas where the workforce that is still necessary to operate the hotels and the banks and so on live. And that, in the case of Miami, that is moving farther and farther to the west toward Hialeah and so on, and to the north toward Miami Gardens and even into Broward County.
I'm hoping that our leaders will read your book and get a better idea of what kind of global city we want Miami to be. I want to end this interview by asking you, you never judge a book by its cover, but I understand that the cover of your book is special. Tell us about that.
Well, the cover of the book is an allegory to the 3 cities. It's an artistic allegory to the 3 cities. It's clearly identified the Burj Al Arab Hotel in Dubai, which looks like a sail. It's there, and then there is this cover was dreamed up by a Miami artist, Javier Cortada, who is also has become very prominent in his campaigns for several public causes there, and it was appointed by the present mayor of Miami-Dade as the artist in residence. He's the artist in residence, and he also happens to be a good friend. So we discussed it. I told him the idea about the book, and he mulled it about for weeks and weeks and weeks, and finally came up with this cover, which is an original. It's not painted anywhere. It was done just to serve as the cover of the book.
You have a wonderful artist that did that work for you. Professor Alejandro Portes, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for the interview.
In the book, Portes and co-author Ariel Armani highlight the importance of climate change to the prospects of emerging global cities, showing how rising sea levels could impact Miami, Singapore, and Dubai's future as global cities. When we come back, Monroe County marks a milestone. Stay with us.